Hey everybody, this is Rob Meldrum, the Book of Mormon Evidence Guy, and I'm standing here with my dear friend David Hocking, and he is the author and creator and so forth of a series of scriptural books, basically, that are just phenomenal. And I wanted to start off with a little bit of an introduction here as to how we met. Tell us a little bit more about what you were doing before we actually met.
Yeah, so a few years ago, back in the 90s, I made a decision that I was going to be a modern day John Gilbert. Now, who's John Gilbert? John Gilbert was the individual that was at the Grandin Press who did the typesetting for the Book of Mormon. And what does that mean? Well, the tools of his trade back then was this big press that had these large sheets, and he'd have to, have these little fonts
Of type.
and font types. There was like 2,500 of these little fonts, and they had the different sizes, and they were all in their cubicles. And he had to meticulously look at the printer's manuscript that had no punctuation. So using a little pencil, he would say, "Oh, a comma here, a period here, start a new paragraph here." So it was tedious, and so that's what we have as the Book of Mormon. And so that's what I grew up with. Everybody grows up with that Book of Mormon. But I always said, well, I'm in the East Coast, and I have what I call red letter editions of the Bible. What is a red letter edition?
Yeah.
Well, red letter is the words of Christ or the words of God.
Yeah.
So that helps differentiate who's speaking.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
And so no one in the Book of Mormon world or the Mormon world ever saw a red letter edition of the Book of Mormon. It just didn't exist.
Never been done.
It had never been done.
Yeah.
And yet I have a computer, and instead of having this old-fashioned typesetting, I have this modern thing called the computer. So when I say I'm going to be a modern day John Gilbert, I'm going to take the raw text that is there, that's in the public domain. The public domain means that anything older than 75 years means that it's not copyrighted.
Yeah.
What's copyrightable will be what you call chapter headings, subheadings, footnotes, Bible dictionaries, introductory material. That's copyrightable, but the text itself isn't.
Yeah.
So I decided to take the text, I, Nephi, having been Gordon Greeley parents, and start the process of being a modern day John Gilbert. Mm-hmm. And in the process, it transformed my understanding of the Book of Mormon. It clarified who was speaking. It gave me stylized elements where I could say, hey, this is a prophecy. I'll indent this. So it's a visual that tells me this is something special.
Yeah.
It's a prophecy. So then as I go through it, I say, wait a minute, angels are coming to visit with Nephi. And so how do I differentiate that? I chose a blue color. So now you've got another visual that will say, now that's a different person speaking.
Yeah.
See? And then I said, he, him, thee, thine, these are all small letters because the type font that he had to work with didn't have enough capital H's or capital M's. Yeah. They only had enough of small letter M's and all of the Bibles are that way. The Book of Mormon's that way. I, as a modern day John Gilbert, said, I'm going to celebrate the deity. Everything that's referencing deity will be capitalized.
Yes.
It
As we would do in modern day English.
Yeah. So I have become a modern day John Gilbert. and in doing that, I had raw text. I did it. And then I would go to the FARMS organization, the Foundation of Ancient Research Mormon Studies at the BYU. And I said, there's some cool information from Hugh Nibley and from Sorensen and this. And I would say, maybe I can introduce some of that material.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I would then print out in a spiral bound, and I'd have these little things, and I go, at least I'm bringing some fresh looks and fresh eyes to an ancient text.
Yeah.
And
how long did it take you to do this process?
It took me a few years. Yeah, it took me. I finalized the what I call the formatting. It took me maybe 3 years. So I started this in the mid '90s.
Yeah.
And then it was around 2000. When did you come up with the
Heartland Research.
you know, that
I
book.
started doing the research in 2006, really,
Yeah.
and then, well, actually 2003 and 2004. And then the first DVD I did was in 2008.
That's
And
yeah,
we actually met, I think, after the first couple of books came out,
yeah,
and like Prophecies and Promises, and then
yeah,
the Exploring the Book of Mormon America's Heartland book, which was in 2012.
yeah.
So yeah,
So it's about that time that I said, you know, I like this information and it makes more sense to me than what I'm getting from farms. And I said, you know, one of these
yeah.
days, you know, and then lo and behold, my brother-in-law, my wife's older brother, who served a mission in Guatemala, I was explaining what I was learning from Rod Meldrum.
He's
And
like,
he goes, no way, it happened down there.
no
I went
way.
down there, I know what I'm talking about. I said, well, at least look at it, you know. And he loved it. And then he bought your book and he bought one for us. He goes, thank you for introducing this to me. So
Well,
we got in the mail a book that you signed. You don't know who I am. You're just signing a book. I'm looking, I go, this is what really makes sense.
wow.
And so
Wow.
I would like to incorporate that. So then I made the decision to be bold. I then sent you
An email, I think it
an
was.
email with a
Yes.
PDF file,
Yes. with
what
your
I was
book.
doing. And I
Yeah.
says, let's see if we can work together.
And I was blown away because
Yeah.
the thing about with John Gilbert is that here's a guy who's doing his best. The original text didn't have anything, and he had to put the punctuation and things
Yeah.
in. But it wasn't necessarily an inspired thing. I mean, he wasn't getting revelation
No.
from God about where he's going to put a comma or whatever. And we're not claiming that necessarily either. But there's things that you were able to do
Yeah.
to actually, like you said, reformat the text. And when I saw that the first time, I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
'Cause for the first time, when it's a direct quote, it's actually indented, put into quotation marks.
Yeah.
And you can tell this is a direct quote. And with the red lettering,
Yeah.
it's like, I've always loved the New Testament with the red letters,
Yeah.
the red letter editions.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I thought, well, there's so many quotes by Christ and by God
Yeah.
in the Book of Mormon. Why have we never had a red letter edition from the church? And then and here you come along and you do that. And then you started asking me questions. I tell you, this guy is an incredibly fast learner when it comes down to being able to take all the Heartland research that's taken years and years and years, and you assimilated it in like 6 months.
Yeah.
You just did a deep dive.
Yeah.
And then put all of that information in along with this reformatted text that you've done.
Yeah. And I had to redo
Oh my gosh,
the
it's
text
beautiful.
because when I sent you, it was in a Times Roman 10 font. And you said, let's, you know, who's the audience here? It's a little bit older. So let's see if we can go to a 12-point font. So I had to go through in the entire
pagination and everything.
I redid the entire book.
Yeah.
And learning new software. I had to find another software package that would be more publishing type software.
Yeah.
So I found one out of England. It was called Page Plus, and it's
Yeah.
called Page Plus for a reason. You build a page at a time, and then you can add things to that page. That's why the plus.
Images, because the original one I think
Yeah.
was mostly all just text. if I
Exactly.
remember correctly.
Yeah.
So now we've got these beautiful images. In fact, why don't you hold up the book here
Yeah.
for a second, because
Yeah.
and just for our audience members, just so that you know. So this came out. We are on our 6th or 7th edition.
Yeah.
We're actually printing, I should say,
Yeah.
of like 10,000 each. We got it. It's been in Deseret Book now. It was in Costco while Costco still actually carried books, and it has now become you are the head editor basically of the managing editor, I think is how you put it.
Yeah.
In the front of the book, of now what has become the #1 best-selling edition of the Book of Mormon in English in the church. And so I just want to congratulate you for your monumental efforts here to incorporate the Heartland research along with the Book of Mormon, and it's so beautiful how it just seamlessly comes together.
Yeah. So if you look at this page as an example, it's pretty flat. There's no pictures or stuff, but there's a lot of color. And you notice that I have this indented. This is blue color. We get within the blue, we get red. So there's an angel speaking, or it's quoting from Isaiah. So scripture that's being quoted will be blue, or if it's an angel, it'll be blue. And then when the Lord speaks, it'll be in red. And notice that you see these colors. Yeah, you see the color. So now you see the red. You see my paragraph headings. All of the numbers, the verse numbers are superscript. They're not huge. They're just up. I minimize the look of the scripture number, the verse number, and then if
I love, like, for example, here where it's underlined, that is a phrase that is an Isaiah phrase
yeah,
that is a little bit different than the King James Version, because Joseph Smith was getting this directly from the plates. He wasn't copying the King James Version.
Yeah.
And so this shows you the differentials between the King James Version. This is the most advanced edition of the Book of Mormon that's ever been published.
Yeah, it's very, very well researched, and I'm telling you, if you were to be over my shoulder and saw what I had to do on the computer and all the hours I put into it and the research I put in it, you go, you need to get a gold medal, Brother Hocking. I mean, it's a lot of work because I did it on my own. I mean, and the software allowed me to do all kinds of things. But this gives you an idea that it's a very engaging book. I mean, it's not something you just. In fact, I'll give you one story that shows you how compelling this type of style is. I had the last conference, a woman comes up to me, she says, I am really mad at you, Brother Hocking. I go, what have I done? What have I said? What have I, she goes, I used to just in my morning breakfast, I would say, I want to read 3 chapters in the Book of Mormon. And I'd read the 3 chapters and I'd be off. But then when I got your book, I got this little thing where I can hold it up as I eat and I can go through the pages. And I start reading your book and I can't stop reading your book. And then I look at my clock, I'm late for work. And she says, I no longer just think about how many chapters I'm going to read. I just want to read for the enjoyment of reading.
Yes.
And that's why I'm mad at you, because I've been late to work multiple times.
I've had people who have told me that reading this, and these are members, people who have been members their whole lives. They've read the Book of Mormon over and over again. They said when they got this edition of the Book of Mormon, they said it was like reading the Book of Mormon all over again for the very first time.
Yeah.
They got so much more out of it.
Yeah.
Because of all of the pictures and the information and the additional insights. You have insights pages, like 260 something pages of insights in this book, in addition to the text itself reformatted. And I love the reformatting because it's written in paragraphs that are logical paragraphs.
That's
a lot of
the
times
key.
The breaks in the Book of Mormon have been kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird. It kind of cut that thought right in half when John Gilbert did it.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you one more thing in here, then we move on.
Yeah.
But this is an example of the sophistication.
Yes,
this is just one example. Okay, so when I was on my mission in England in 1971, 72, 73, John W. Welch was a missionary 2 or 3 years prior to that in Germany. And he's the one that went to a lecture by a professor that talked about Hebrew writing style called chiastic structures. And so he was enamored with it. He goes, wow, this is really, if that's the sign of a Hebrew writing style, and if the Book of Mormon is supposed to be Hebrew, maybe there's some chiastic patterns there. So that's when he was the one that discovered chiastic patterns in the Book of Mormon on his mission in Germany. So he comes back to BYU and he writes a paper. And I happen to read, I go to BYU and I read his paper. So I understood now that he was looking at the entire book of Isaiah, and he structured the entire book of Isaiah chiastically. But the one thing he didn't do is that he didn't end up in the pure chiastic structure, because he didn't finish the book of Isaiah at the end, because there's something that didn't quite match up at the beginning. I understood that the beginning of Isaiah is mid-sentence, and now there is no more contention in the land of Zarahemla. That's not how you start a sentence. That's not how you start a chapter.
Something was missing.
In a book. What's missing? Well, it was the 116 pages. There was some material on that, and that was not part of what chapter 1 should have been. So I looked at his structure and I restructured his structure. And so I said that the A starts out with the A is on the missing 116 pages,
Yeah.
and had to do the reign of the kings. Then chapter 1, verse 1 is actually starting out with B, not A. So then you'll see over here I have B, then you'll see C, and as you go through the entire book, you'll follow those letters on this chiastic structure.
Yeah.
Now the center part
just for a second. So those of you who don't know what a chiastic structure is, it's basically the idea that the first will be last, last will be first. There's concept A, then concept B, concept C, and it can go on. And then it returns back to concept C and goes back to concept D and then concept A.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of so it creates this pattern, this structure that is not known in any other languages, I don't think.
That's correct. And the chias means crossover.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be the crossover, and that's the center point. Then it's a reflection of what you just read.
Yes.
So and the crossover is Abinadi quoting from Isaiah
about the Messianic Jesus Christ.
And it's about Jesus Christ. So the center the center book of the Book of Mormon is about Jesus Christ. That's quoting from Isaiah. So now, but where did it end? It ended up with Alma being the chief judge, and the reign of the kings ended. Where it starts out here in the beginning is the reign of the kings.
Yes.
So now it's stopped, and now it's going to be the judges.
It's gone full circle.
And so this was my epiphany.
Can I throw in another little thing?
Yeah.
Keep that page open, because just a couple of pages after that, the interesting thing about this is that when Mormon was doing the abridgment, he had to be really brilliant, because in the book of Mosiah, it jumps around in time.
Yeah.
That's the next page right here.
Yeah.
Right here in time. So, and you can't see this, but basically this is Mosiah chapters 1 through 8, starts at 130 BC and goes down to 121 BC, and it talks about Benjamin. But then in chapters 9 through 22, it jumps all the way back, 70 more years, back to 200 BC, and picks up the Zeniff, Noah, and Abinadi story, and then ends up here. Then the next two chapters, chapter 22 and 23, is a second, what we call the flashback, which is 145, and picks up the Alma the Elder story. And then the last couple of chapters here of Mosiah starts from here and talks about Mosiah II, and goes down to 91 BC. So here we have Mormon, who's abridging this, is actually jumping back and forth in time, but he keeps the chiastic structure intact.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
He is purposely creating these flashbacks to make it chiastic. He's forcing the chiastic by using the material that's in front of him to introduce material to produce the chiasm.
Yeah. The thing I find really fascinating about that is that, how did Joseph Smith know this?
Yeah, exactly.
No one knew about chiasms back in that point in time.
No.
So if he was making this up himself, there would be no reason for him to put in chiastic structures. Yet, how many chiastic structures approximately are there in the book?
It goes on, and Alma 32, Alma 36. There's so many in there, and others have taken virtually all of the chapters and show that they're all chiastic.
So I mean, it is a fascinating, but I think it's another testimonial that Joseph Smith was not making this stuff up. This is something that Hebrews did. The Book of Mormon claims to be of Hebrew people, and so it makes perfect sense.
So the Book of Mormon, the way we put this together is that not only is it more engaging, and it has color and these stylized elements that make it more enjoyable, it actually produces more of comprehension. Your ability to understand has been heightened. And as a result, you're going to enjoy reading the chapters, not feel like you have to read the chapters. Exactly. And I think that's the gift of being a modern day John Gilbert, is how can you make something that is this ancient with biblical history, that when you read it in a normal way, it doesn't have the same impact that when you see. We live in a world that we see visualization. We have TVs, we have movies, we are constantly have something on our phone with something showing you visualizations of things. There's color all around us. When you look at an old Bible or an old Book of Mormon, it's just black and white. So now having something like this, it just transforms how you understand and read.
Absolutely. Well, so after this, then you began a process of taking a lot of apocryphal texts
Yeah.
and basically doing the same kind of treatment on them with the red letters and so forth, and the angels and the blue and the red and so forth, and adding images and so forth. And the next one was
The Book of Jasher.
the Book of Jasher. Yeah, love the Book of Jasher.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
in my research, I learned that the Book of Jasher was published in 1840, and that was intriguing to me because the Book of Mormon gets published in 1830.
30, yeah.
So this is 10 years after the Book of Mormon, and that just piqued my interest. The second thing that piqued my interest was that the original publisher is named Mordecai Noah out of New York. He was a Jew, and he came from the Iberian Peninsula. Well, why that fascinated me was because the Book of Jasher means Sefer Yahasher, which means the Book of the Upright. And it's not a person. It's not the prophet Jasher. Also, the Book of Jasher is referenced in the Old Testament twice.
Yeah.
So it's evidently a book that was used by all the writers of the Old Testament. So that was another thing that intrigued me. The final thing was that once Mordecai Noah passed away, who got the copyright for the Book of Jasher? It was the J.H. Perry Company out of Salt Lake City. And that is what compelled me to go further. Why is it this Salt Lake City publisher wants to publish the Book of Jasher? Then I started looking at statements by Joseph Smith, and he made a statement in his work, and in the History of the Church, volume number 2, where he says, "We have yet to find the Book of Jasher yet, but it will come forth." That's in his history.
So he made a prophecy.
He, in essence, made a prophecy. And then along with this, he also mentioned that he was working on the Apocrypha, and he got the revelation known as Section 91, saying that these books, there's truth in them, but there's also things that the Spirit will help you. So that in itself intrigued me. Then I did more research, and I found out that Joseph Smith was living when the Book of Jasher got translated, because it was 1840.
Yeah.
He passed in 1844, so the Times and Seasons had an article about the Book of Jasher. So I said, I got to find more about this. And so once I got into
it, there were copies out there, but not an
I found it
edition.
online, and it was an authentic journal, from an authentic site. And it was in the public domain because this, again, is published in 1840. So I started going through it, and lo and behold, I was not only enjoying the story but I was finding things that reminded me of the Book of Mormon.
Wow, yeah.
Captain Moroni talks about, Joseph's coat was torn. We don't hear them being torn in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But the Book of Jasher, Issachar says, here, let's take his coat and tear it. And then kill a kid of goat. Let's dip it, and then we'll trample it in the dust. What does Moroni say? We don't want to be trampled by our brethren. He's got the word trample in a coat. And also,
oh my goodness.
And then, just like Joseph's coat was preserved, we want to be. Where is that in the Old Testament? And I find that in the world of the Muslims, they have their own history because of the family of Abraham. They have stories about Egypt, Joseph of Egypt, and in the story, the garment that was given to Joseph had the air of paradise where it never decayed.
Wow.
So that's coming into the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
So where did Captain Moroni get that? It had to come from the plates of brass.
Yeah.
And that shows you the
phenomenal
antiquity of the Book of Mormon. These are sources that Nephi said, other books I saw that would come forth that would testify the prophets and the apostles.
Yeah.
And these are the books that Nephi saw.
Well, one of the things I love about the Book of Jasher is the whole commentary. It has so much more information than the Bible does.
Yeah.
About what happened with Joseph when Jacob sent him to Egypt to go get things, and then Benjamin and all that kind of stuff, and how Judah. I mean, it is
so rich,
incredible, unbelievable story.
To me, the Book of Jasher is the key to understanding the priesthood office of 70.
Yeah,
we have an office of 70. I've asked everybody that I know over my lifetime, and I'm 74, tell me, where do we get the office of 70? Where does the word 70 come from? The book of Jasher, in my mind, answers it. It comes first with 70 angels are going to confound the language of the Tower of Babel. That's where you get the word 70, and they're angels, and there's 70 languages. The next time you encounter the word 70 is Joseph of Egypt is in Egypt, and he's going to have to speak to the Pharaoh because the Pharaoh wants his dreams to be interpreted, but his people said, he can't come and speak to you unless he knows the 70 languages of the kingdom. So in the nighttime, the angel comes to him, which I believe is Angel Gabriel, which is Noah. He teaches him the 70 languages. Now, who is Joseph? He's from the house of Israel. Where is he? He's in a Gentile nation. What is he going to do? He's going to save that nation. And so now he speaks, he goes 70 steps. Each step he has a different language. He finally gets to the top, speaks the language of the Egyptian, and now he's going to be the second in charge of Egypt, and he's going to save them. Our church is the only church that has the office of sending, which is to take the gospel to the Gentiles.
The 70, yep.
And you're going to have to learn the language. And we send out missionaries all over the world with a different tongue.
Over 70.
Yeah, but now there's more than 70.
Yeah.
But that's the original 70. And then in the book of Enoch, which is another book I did, it names the 70 angels.
So, let's just go really quickly through the rest of the books that you've done. So you've got the book of Mormon, the book of Jasher, the book of Isaiah, which is the one that Christ basically says that we all need to study.
And that's the one I did because I said, wait a minute, that's the 11th commandment. A commandment I give you to search Isaiah diligently. And here I was, 72 at the time, or 71. And I go, I haven't done it diligently. I haven't searched it. I haven't lived this commandment. I need to live this commandment.
Yeah.
And that's why I did that.
Okay, and then the next one was the book of Enoch?
The next one was the...
there's 7 of them.
Yeah, it was the book of Enoch, yeah.
What's that?
It was the book of Enoch.
Yeah, book of Enoch, okay. And then?
The Joseph Smith translation of the New Testament.
Yep, the New Testament.
And then
the book of Moses.
The 5 books of Moses,
yep,
which I incorporated a lot of the Enoch texts, and I incorporated the book of Abraham, because those are additional material that goes into the Genesis story. I also include a lot from the book of Jasher, because it's a Genesis story. And Joseph Smith completes the Genesis story.
There's not that many members of the church that have actually read all of those apocryphal works that could actually even know to put them together and how to put them together. So this has been a monumental work. But I want to get to the latest one, and I think is it the last one?
So far, I have others, but yeah, this is the last one as of today.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this is the annotated edition of the Revelations of Joseph Smith. Now, I have to say that I've always wanted to be able to read the Doctrine and Covenants because it jumps around in time.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see, okay, so how did this actually come out as far as Joseph Smith's time frame?
Yeah.
And going through, now in the beginning of it, the church has had, this is chronologically as they went, but you have to actually go and flip back and forth and so forth.
Yeah.
And then I've always wanted to have an edition where I could actually do a reading of the Revelations of Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
In the order that he received them.
Yeah.
And that's what you did.
I did
Just
that.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So this is my quick section guide that if you wanted to read section 1, for example, so before I do this, I would say this. There's a reason why I call this not the Doctrine and Covenants. I'm calling it the Revelations of Joseph Smith.
Yes.
I do it for a reason. Number one is I'm highlighting Joseph Smith being the revelator of the great dispensation. He revealed the Book of Mormon. He was the translator of it. He got the Book of Abraham. He revealed the visions of Moses and the writings of Moses. He was a revelator. And these sections we call section 1 or section 2, they are revelations. There's other revelations that aren't in section numbers, like the visions were opened to me, and the man in front, his name was Zelph. That's a revelation.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm going to put his revelations in the order he received them. So now the first time they put together those revelations, it was known as the Book of Commandments, 1833. It never fully got published because they destroyed the printing press, and therefore more revelations were coming. So let's redo it. 1835. We're going to redo it, but we're going to now call it the Doctrine and Covenants. And they're not going to be called the Book of Commandments. Why did they choose that? Well, it's because they had the lectures on faith that were given in Kirtland. That becomes the doctrines. Why the covenants? Well, we have the Old Testament. That's really the Old Covenant. We have the New Testament. That's really the New Covenant. But now we have a new covenant because now it's the restoration of the covenant. So that's why it's called the Doctrines and Covenants, because it's like the New Testament. Now it's the New Testament in the New World. So now we have the terminology Doctrine and Covenants. However, in 1920, they removed the lectures on faith, but they still retain the Doctrine and Covenants. But in my view, they should not have called it Doctrine and Covenants once they removed the lectures. So I made the decision consciously not to call it the Doctrine and Covenants, because there's no lectures in faith in here, because they weren't revelations. They were lectures.
Yes.
I'm only going to concentrate on his revelation.
The revelations, yes.
Not Brigham Young's, not Wilford Woodruff, or any of these others. It's only concentrating on what Joseph Smith received, because he brought in the fullness of the gospel and the priesthood authority and all of that. So by doing that, I then said, I'm going to go to his history. And this is the page where I go and say, I'm using the history of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints by Joseph Smith himself, with the editor of B.H. Roberts. B.H. Roberts was a 70, and he was the one that was academic, and he did all the work. So volume 1 came out in 1902, published by Deseret News, Salt Lake City. Then volume 2 came out, volume 3. So the voice of Joseph is going to be seen in his own history. I'm going to choose his history, reading those, and then putting in context, in chronological order, how the restoration of the church was unfolding. So then when I did that, I noticed that there are 4 major categories, and they are all based on 4 things. First 20 revelations that he received had to do with the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. Once the Book of Mormon was published, 2.5 weeks later, the Church of Christ was organized. What was the foundational document that became the priesthood manual to organize the church? It was the Book of Mormon. So the Book of Mormon is the foundation for D&C 20 and all of the revelations that follow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we call the Church of Christ period, because the name of the Church of Christ comes from the Book of Mormon. So there are going to be 90 revelations he received in that time frame. Then on May 3rd, 1834, they're on Zion's camp. They're going to redeem Israel. And what is the church name? It's called the Church of the Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
So that's another break. And so that break becomes 14 revelations. And finally, 1838, thus shall my church be called in the last days, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So breaking it in those 4 categories and doing it in chronological order just unbelievably helps you understand how the gospel was restored.
And what the parts that I love as well is that in these green boxes, basically, is the historical documentation of what was going on in Joseph Smith's life at the time of the receipt of these revelations.
The other thing I do is I have a chart in here that tells you the date the revelation was given first, followed by how old he was.
Like starting at 15 or whatever.
Yeah, and so but he has 130 revelations before he's 28.
Wow. Well, you have done an absolute monumental job. I really really appreciate all the
Yeah.
work that you've done. And look forward to more things in the future. You've had some health things that you've overcome, and you're looking good and
Well, thanks.
feeling
Have
chipper.
more energy than ever. Yeah. Yeah.
So we wanted to thank our Father in heaven, actually, for helping you get through some of that. That was pretty nip and tuck at a couple
praise,
times.
praise Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ.
Yes.
They've been my constant companion. I've had lots of inspiration. I've had revelations, and it's been a very inspirational journey for me. And it's been wonderful to get to know these conferences people. I mean, amazing amount of energy and love and all that. It's just been wonderful for me. Yeah.
Well, listen, everybody, thank you again for joining us here with my good friend David Hocking. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you want to get the entire interview, you can go to our streaming website. Just go to the main website, which is bookofmormonevidence.org. And if you want to get copies of it, we have them in our bookstore, and you can get them at Deseret Book, and then you can get them from your website as well. What's your book? Tell us your website.
It's Beacon Light Books.
Beacon Light Books. And we just want to just thank you for all of the effort that you've done. I think you've made a major impact.
Well, thank you so much. And you've made an impact, and together we're impactful.
Thank you so much. Love you, brother.